Hello, everyone. Welcome to this virtual talk about Mikhail Gorbachev. My name is Art Norman. I am a volunteer docent at the Museum of Russian Icons in Clinton, Massachusetts. The Museum of Russian Icons is full of beautiful icons recognizing feast days and saints of the Orthodox Church. Today, we are not recognizing a saint, but the last Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, on the 30th anniversary of his receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. Mikhail Gorbachev is best known for bringing reform to the Soviet Union and helping to end the Cold War. He bears the nickname, the Marked One, because of a birthmark on his head. Mikhail Gorbachev was the last leader of the Soviet Union before it dissolved in 1991. He brought many reforms to the Soviet Union. His relationships with Western leaders such as Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher helped that endeavor. Mikhail was born in Stavropol, Russia, on March 2nd, 1931. His parents both worked in agriculture. He also worked in agriculture while attending school. His childhood was filled with difficult events. In 1933, a famine swept through much of Russia. Two of his sisters and an uncle died during the famine. In 1937, his grandfather was arrested for supporting the followers of Leon Trotsky. Later, in 1942, his town was occupied by the Germans. The famine was caused by a combination of factors, specifically low harvest due to natural disasters combined with increased demand for food caused by industrialization and urbanization, and grain exports by the Soviet Union at the same time. Since they were exporting grain that was much needed to feed its own people, a famine occurred, and this famine had a severe impact on Gorbachev. When he was 15, Mikhail was awarded the Order of the Red Banner of Labor. In 1950, Mikhail went to Moscow University, where he received a degree in law. There, he also met his wife, Reza, and joined the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. After graduating in 1955, Gorbachev first worked as a member of the Communist Youth Organization. He still has great concern for the youth, the future of the world. In 1961, he was selected to be delegate for Stavropol at the 22nd Communist Party Congress in Moscow. Over the next several years, Mikhail Gorbachev became a leader in the Communist Party. First, in 1970, he became first secretary for the entire Stavropol territory. Then, in 1971, he moved to Moscow as the Secretary of Agriculture. He quickly became a force in Moscow, gaining influence with powerful leaders. In 1980, he was selected to be a member of the Politburo, the most powerful group in the Communist Party. He was the youngest member. Within a few short years, Gorbachev gained considerable influence on the Politburo. After two aging leaders died in 1984 and 1985, the Communist Party wanted someone young and healthy to take over as leader. On March 11, 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev became the General Secretary of the Soviet Union. When he took over as leader, the Soviet economy was struggling. He wanted to reform the economy as well as the government. In order to do this, he needed support. So he began replacing some of the older members with younger members who shared his vision. Mikhail Gorbachev was the last leader of the Soviet Union before it dissolved in 1991, as I already said. His reform included new freedoms. Fear of nuclear war and its financial burden led him to establish relationships with Western leaders such as Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, and helped end the Cold War.
Do business together.
This was a breakthrough. Мы, американцы, лучше всех знаем, чего стоило бы. Гибель цивилизации. Głęboko wierzył, że da radę zreformować Koper. Więc go zachęcaliśmy, brawo, mówiliśmy, żeby reformował. Powiedzieliśmy, że wyjmie pewien element i to się zawarł. I z tymi brawami popatrzyliśmy kiedyś.
Gorbachev announced two main areas of reform. He called them glasnost and perestroika. Glasnost called for increasing openness in government. It also allowed for some freedom of speech and less censorship. Perestroika was a restructuring of the economy and industry. It allowed for some private ownership and economic reforms to try to improve the Soviet economy. Gorbachev met with President Ronald Reagan many times. Here he says at Geneva in 1985, a nuclear war can never be won and should never be fought. And later on, he signed a INF treaty regarding nuclear weapons with Ronald Reagan. Gorbachev was also known for other reforms. For example, he also removed Soviet troops from Afghanistan, ending the Soviet-Afghanistan War. He indicated that the Soviet Union would no longer interfere in other countries in Eastern Europe. This caused a major change in the world. Without the fear of the Soviet Union, countries such as East Germany, Poland, and Hungary got rid of their communist governments. In 1989, the Berlin Wall in Germany was torn down. But there were some disasters too. The April 1986 disaster at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine was the product of a flawed Soviet reactor design, coupled with serious mistakes made by plant operators. It was a direct consequence of Cold War isolation and the resulting lack of any safety cultures. So, it led to major changes in safety culture and in industry cooperation, particularly between East and West before the end of the Soviet Union. Former President Gorbachev said that the Chernobyl accident was a more important factor in the fall of the Soviet Union than perestroika, his program of liberal reform. Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev were unusual bedfellows. They managed to forge not only a mutual respect, but a friendship which helped end the Cold War. Here's a great example of how close Reagan and Gorbachev actually
you know
were.
it or not, but I have a new hobby. I am collecting stories that I can actually prove are told among the Russian people. They make them up themselves, they tell them between themselves, reveals they got a great sense of humor, and they've also got a little cynical attitude about things in their country. And one of these stories, the one I'm going to tell you, I told to General Secretary Gorbachev, and he laughed. The story was an American and a Russian arguing about their two countries, and the American said, look, in my country, I can walk into the Oval Office, I can pound the president's desk and say, Mr. President, I don't like the way you're running our country. And the Russian said, I can do that. The American said, you can? He says, yes. I can go into the Kremlin, to the General Secretary's office, pound his desk and say, Mr. General Secretary, I don't like the way President Reagan's running his country.
Because of the involvement of many world leaders and Gorbachev, the Cold War ended, but there was unrest within the Soviet Union. There was growing concern within the Communist Party. So in August of 1991, communist hardliners who didn't agree with Gorbachev's reforms tried to take over the government. They kidnapped Gorbachev and said he was sick and couldn't rule. Soon, protests grew, and Gorbachev was set free, but the damage to the government had been done. On December 26, 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev announced his resignation as leader of the Soviet Union, and the Union was split into 15 separate countries. Although Gorbachev's reforms allowed for more freedom, many states used this freedom to protest and eventually claim independence from the Soviet Union. Because of his involvement in ending the Cold War, Mikhail Gorbachev was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991. Over the years, Time magazine has paid much attention to Gorbachev and his worldview, and have honored him as Man of the Year and Man of the Decade. Time's latest recognition was in April 2020, when he was interviewed about coronavirus and world affairs. In typical Gorbachev fashion, these words are prophetic and bold as he looks ahead for a peaceful future. I would like to read part of that message. During the first months of this year, we have seen once again how fragile is our global world, how great the dangers of sliding into chaos. The COVID-19 pandemic is facing all countries with a common threat, and no country can cope with it alone. The immediate challenge today is to defeat this new vicious enemy. But even today, we need to start thinking about life after its retreat. Many are now saying that the world will never be the same. But what will it be like? That depends on what lessons will be learned. The leaders of the Soviet Union and the US declared in the 1980s that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. But even though by now, 85% of those arsenals have been destroyed, the threat is still there. What we urgently need now is a rethinking of the entire concept of security. I'll never tire of repeating, we need to demilitarize world affairs, international politics, and political thinking. To address this at the highest international level, I am calling on world leaders to convene an emergency special session of the UN General Assembly to be held as soon as the situation is stabilized. It should be about nothing less than revising the entire global agenda. This is the least they should do now as a first step toward a new consciousness, a new civilization. Throughout his presidency, Gorbachev promoted peaceful diplomacy, which led to the Cold War. He has remained involved in politics. He started new political parties in Russia and even ran for president in 1996, though he didn't win. But despite all this, he has remained a leader on the world stage, acting as its elder statesman. Here he is with Margaret Thatcher and other world leaders at Ronald Reagan's funeral. On the left is a picture of Mikhail with his beloved wife. On the right is a picture of her funeral in 1999. In 2011, Gorbachev was honored in Russia on his 80th birthday. He received the prestigious Order of St. Andrei Award, Russia's most honorable declaration. Celebrities in the West honored him at Prince Albert Hall in London on that momentous birthday for his making the world a better place. Again, Throughout his presidency and afterwards, Mikhail Gorbachev has promoted peaceful diplomacy. Several years ago, in his office, where the walls are lined with photos from his travels as a leader of the Soviet Union and the years after his demise, pictures abound. One showing him with his late wife, Teresa, standing arm in arm with Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. In another frame, he wears a cowboy hat and jeans as he stands beside Ronald Reagan, the US president, who famously branded Gorbachev's country an evil empire in 1983. These portraits, like many others in his Moscow office, betray Gorbachev's affection for his former American adversaries. Here are pictures of him, one just a few years ago. He still is involved with his love of youth and is concerned for the future of the world. This brings us to a connection between the Museum of Russian Icons and Mikhail Gorbachev. Gordon Langton is the founder of the Museum of Russian Icons. After serving in the US military intelligence in 1956, he spent a year traveling around the world on a motorcycle from Germany to Japan. One country he was not able to visit was the Soviet Union because of the hostilities of the Cold War. In 1989, travel restrictions into Russia were lifted, and Gordon joined a United States Chamber of Commerce group to open business ties with Russia. On that business trip, two important museum-related events happened. Gordon purchased his first icon at an open-air market and built a factory in Moscow. Subsequent trips to Moscow to visit the Dnipro site gave Gordon the opportunity to grow a collection of icons and learn about the Russian people. It eventually led to the establishment of the Museum of Russian Icons. The Tretyakov Museum in Moscow is the premier museum of Russian icons. Here is Gordon Langton with the Tretyakov director learning about icons. I would like to end with a short clip of the Museum of Russian Icon founder, Gordon Langton, explaining in his own words his recollection of the museum's founding.
23, okay.
So I got to know quite a bit about the world, and I found it very interesting, and so my life changed dramatically after that motorcycle trip. And I was never able to go to China or Russia because of the Cold War. So in 1980, when China opened up, I went over there for about 10 years, just trips, but setting up plastics factories in China. And then when the Soviet Union broke up in 1990, I went to Russia and got to know a little bit about Russia, set up a plastics factory. And I was interested in learning the history, the culture, and about the people. And one of the things I did was to go to Izmailova in Moscow and go to the flea market. And when I was there, I saw something laying in the dust on the ground and picked it up, and I was told it was an icon. I'd never seen a Russian icon before. So it was very inexpensive, $20. I bought it and brought it home and started studying.
Do you remember what image on the icon? What kind of icon?
St. Nicholas, it's downstairs. I can show it to you.
Okay.
So then I, became more and more interested. So in my return trips, I bought one for $50, then $100, then $500, and it's 40 trips later. And 15 years later, and I have a museum. So that's kind of my history. Well, the museum is really exciting. When I did it, I didn't know whether people would come or not because this art is not known very well in the Western world.
Here is a picture of Gordon's first icon. I want to thank you for watching and hope to see you in person soon. Bye.